Okay. Looks like we have relatively new board members from Princeton, is that right? So maybe we can just go around quickly, very quickly, and say our names and what towns we're from. I'm Jessica Stewart, I'm the AOS chair and a member of the Fremont School Board.
I'm Mike Sport, the superintendent.
Roger Saint Amant, Tremont School Board.
Wanda Fortin, the director of teaching and learning for pre-K through grade 6.
Jim Sawyer, Southwest Iowa School Board.
Bo Lively, Southwest School Board. Village, Southwest Iowa School Board.
Misha Maitar from Bar Harbor, also relative new.
Marie Yarborough from the Bar Harbor School. Robin C. Chaplin, Bar Harbor School Board.
Tyson Starling, Bar Harbor School Board.
Lily Simmons, Bar Harbor School Board.
Curtis Shaw, Trenton School Board.
Michaela Winger, Trenton School Board.
Gail Marshall, Mount Desert School Board.
Jennifer Yancey,
Jamie Whitman,
Eliza Bishop, Fremont.
Gary Bird, Trenton.
Harry Hayes, Tremont Chair.
I'm Brian Hinkle with Mount Desert.
And so
That's Selena.
did not introduce herself. That, like, the executive. So much more also, okay, we have, I believe the voucher has gone around, so if you haven't signed it, check your email and sign the voucher via DocuSign. Public comment. So is there anyone here for public comment? Okay,
Question on that. There
Yes.
seem to be two public comment periods.
we always have one at the beginning and one at the end.
I guess I'll reserve it.
Okay. I'll go now, sure, okay.
I wanted to talk about the half-day proposal. So my notes are going to be brief. I just want to focus on solutions and not problems. So I discovered when researching this issue that Maine has one of the fewest number of required school days in the US. And the only states that require fewer are Kentucky and Louisiana. Also, Maine is in the minority of states that does not also mandate a minimum number of instructional hours. This is probably why our schools can get away with counting half days as full days. The school calendar is entirely the domain of the school board, so this issue will never see a ballot. School days are set by the state. You can reach out to your state legislators, Grohowski and Lynn Williams, like I have, to initiate legislation to amend the state requirements to include an instructional hours minimum. I feel like we cannot trust the school board to be transparent or acknowledge parent input when it comes to half days. So I plan to elevate this issue, and I encourage any parent concerned with education of their children to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Have a public comment? Okay, there is quite a bit of written public comment, which everyone should have read before arriving at this meeting. It could link in the agenda in case for some reason you got anything through it. I've read it. Okay, so moving on to approval of minutes from 9 January 2023, regular meeting, and 19 January 2023 annual public budget.
Slate, yeah, so I move approval of both sets of minutes.
Here a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. What's that?
Roger's gonna vote as the. You voted no. Oh, okay, that's fine.
Okay, so superintendent report.
So good evening, everyone. So I'll start with enrollment. So we're at a total of 1,418 students from last month. That's down 4. As you know, the previous month we were up 2. And so enrollments sort of ebb and flow as we move through the year. In terms of school highlights, at the high school meeting, Principal Haney spoke about the loss of student Corey Butler, and I just want to take a moment to share the fact that, we live in a wonderful community and, there was basketball games that occurred that day. And the Ellsworth High School, took a moment, they called us and asked about a moment of silence before the game that they were playing, and they did that moment of silence. And that kind of really just sort of touches your heart in terms of a community that comes together when there's loss, and it doesn't necessarily have to be someone so closely tied to your place, but it expands into the broader community. And that was a really special thing from the folks in Ellsworth, and I just wanted to acknowledge that publicly for what they did. A heartfelt concern for our community from them. So I want to thank them. So school highlights. It was funny, Marie, when you talked about the swimming, I was going to identify our swimmers as I was just kind of picking through our schools, because I know, we hear a lot about our basketball players and other sports, and being someone who's sort of tied to a swimming family, there's a lot that goes on, and both the boys and girls team swam really hard and earned quite a few points to come on top, at the meet last Friday. So congratulations to them and the hard work that they do. Also at the high school, we had the unified basketball game with the Ellsworth team, and I didn't have an opportunity to be there. I had a meeting that I had to get to, but I had a chance to sort of watch it. A YouTube video of that game, and and that's just another piece to sort of show how folks can get along and enjoy a sport and play it and work together, so folks can have fun and have an opportunity. It was great to sort of watch that. So Melissa, thank you for sharing that with me. I truly appreciated it when I had an opportunity. I was going to highlight the fact in terms of music. One of the things for our middle school students, we have been struggling with show choir over the years, and thankfully, Bar Harbor was able to get their show choir started, and we tried to sort of manage to do an island-wide show choir, but there was some the ability to bring students on board was difficult this year, but Pematic and Tremont are combining to do one this year, so they're getting started a little late, but they're getting started to provide that opportunity for kids. Did want to highlight that the basketball team at Connors Emerson Middle School boys they won, and also to share a little bit about some of our island schools. Frenchboro for quite a while out there beyond Swans, and they have been coming on to MDI every Wednesday for some services, and of course during COVID they've been sort of doing that over at Town Hill, the center there, and then playing on the playground. But we've been trying to make more connections with some of our local schools as we've done in the past, and Harbor House, one of our community partners, has sort of reached out, and so we're utilizing the Harbor House when the Frenchboro kids come over, so that they have opportunities to interact with kids and do some activities off island. So that has been a really neat thing that happens within our district. February is Black History Month, and I wanted to highlight I was over in Pematic and was doing morning announcements with the kindergarten. I was sitting there, and every morning they have been reading quotes from famous African Americans, and then putting those quotes up on a board when you walk in to sort of talk about in general Americans who have given a part to their country. And so throughout the year at Pematic, they'll be looking at other folks who have done great things for their country, and that's something that they're doing during Black History Month. So it's great when you walk in and see that, and it's every morning during their morning announcements they do that. So that has been a wonderful thing for me to be able to listen to. Also, folks have been probably getting their summer school information out in the newsletters from the local elementary schools. So we've been working hard with our going forward with another year of our district-wide summer school, and that is great. Jumping on that video really early to get that set up, so that is really exciting. I wanted to identify, I think last month I talked about HCTC was hiring a new director. They did hire a new director, and that is Bill Tracy. He was the principal at the Hamden School, and I had an opportunity to meet him last week at our monthly HCTC advisory meeting. So, you know, I think they're in good hands. Right on my list, there's still, you know, school health. Things have been a little better. There have been some spikes of COVID here and there, but our, you know, area is low, but there have been some continued cases that have been popping up locally, but we really haven't had any of the issues that we saw in the past with general sickness as well. So that has been good. For local budgets, I wanted to make sure that you all were aware, because you all know what your budgets have been. And so I wanted to make sure that I was able to share. We just passed the high school budget at a 6.43% increase here tonight. Pematic has passed the budget of over $4.5 million, and that is a 6.2% increase for their budget to budget. Swans passed the budget. And those smaller island communities, they actually are, you know, almost a percent negative in terms of their increase of budget. And sometimes those things happen when you have shifts in personnel and you get people who have retired and folks come in. So, you know, budgets sort of vary. The Cranberry Islands as well have passed their budget at about a 4%. Well, they were a negative increase with some changes in the population there. We are still waiting on Mount Desert, Frenchboro, Tremont, and Trenton to finalize their budgets. Connors Emerson passed a revised budget quickly today as we made some changes with a 5.5% increase and a 1% increase for appropriation. So things are moving along within the budget process, and you know, we'll be marching up to the time when we're out at town meetings to pass those. So that's all coming up. I wanted to talk a little bit about staffing in terms of the central office, and you all saw a little note under the director for teaching and learning was sort of focus on technology. And you know, currently the structure of our office in technology is we have a tech director, a data manager, 40% person who helps with the network administration or the infrastructure, and a tech support specialist that we have been utilizing ESSER funds to support that person. That tech position will sort of go into our budget next year. In thinking about the teaching and learning and the needs, and speaking with folks in the tech department, you know, there's been an understanding of that we need to do a little restructuring to make sure that we're leveraging our technology to the best of our ability and supporting our schools. And so the restructuring that's happening is sort of a switching of job descriptions. It's pretty much sits budget neutral. And so the new structure will have a pre-K-8 tech lead. That'll be someone who will focus specifically on the teaching and learning side of the use of technology and working with tech integrators. We will have the network systems manager, which will be an individual that will focus on sort of the nuts and bolts of the network system, and sort of separating. The idea is to separate the educational side and the infrastructure side in terms of technology and our needs to better leverage what we have for the overall district. And then our data manager and network administrator, that part-time position, and the data manager who does the work of Power School and updates all the state reports, those remain the same. And then there'll be some leveraging with the high school and work with those staff to make sure that the connection between the high school and then the superintendent's office and all of that support really works well together. So I just wanted to give you a sense of that work that we're doing in the central office to better meet the needs of our schools through that restructuring. And then the other update I had was, as you know, we've had the recent storms, and we actually did pretty good as compared to other schools within Hancock County. We had some leaks in Trenton. We had some leaks in Bar Harbor, through the roof. Mount Desert had some leaks, but overall, our schools were open. And unfortunately, there were some schools, around the state that have closed because of damage. Some schools who had to pivot to remote for a little while they fixed one school and kids can be at a different school. And so I feel very lucky. We met as an A-team just before them and sort of talked about things that we could do to try to help you building along. And I sort of monitored outages that night and want to thank Gloria as we were looking at what was going on in Mount Desert to see whether or not there would be a need there to have another warming center. But when contacting the fire department, it was clear that they were doing okay. So we need to use that building, but we were ready to go if there was a need. As they continue to have little blackouts around there. And so, it takes sort of takes a village, especially during those times to make sure that we're taking care of folks. So, I feel lucky that we came through as well as we did. And so, that's all I had for my report. We'll talk more about calendar. It's been spending a lot of my time on that. And so we'll have time to talk about that when we get to that portion and we'll get into the recommendation of it.
Okay, are there questions for Mike, Marie, and then Robin?
Who currently supervises the two positions that are changing into the two new ones?
What we had worked out is the educational lead and the data manager, so the person who does the supports for all the reports that go to the state, that would become under teaching and learning, because those are all aspects of that part of the job. That's the educational focus. So Rhonda and Julie will take a look at those. And then the other side of it, the network and the software manager, that will go under operations, because we see those as a infrastructure type of thing. And those folks are already working together in terms of when you think about our phone systems, cameras, all of that has been within that realm.
So I wonder who currently, the two positions
Oh.
that are being turned into the two you just described with the people that are supervising. Who currently, PK, educational
The
technology
pre-K.
coordinator, who does that?
The pre-K to 12 educational technology coordinator oversees the district tech support special. That's how.
And who
those
does that
two-
person report to? And who is that person overseen by?
The ed tech coordinator? Is that who you're asking?
These positions will be changing are the PK-12 education technology coordinator and the district. They will be reallocated to be overseen by the people you said.
Yeah,
Who are they currently supervised by?
the district tech support is supervised by the educational technology
Who supervises
coordinator,
the
and
district
then
tech?
Julie and I.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get. Okay, thank you. So you both knew, okay, so you both supervise the current.
We share.
Got it, thank you. And now they're gonna be, one is gonna be supervised by the operations manager.
Yes, the position that focuses strictly on infrastructure, tech infrastructure, will be by the operations manager.
You, in the beginning of your report, you talked about enrollment ebbing and flowing. Question on that. I mean, I know the answer personally, but do we ever seek out why students are leaving or graduating early? Or my son left the district after Thanksgiving and nobody has asked the reasons why. And I just feel like enrollment is so important, especially during budget season and asking for money for schools. Like, do we ever ask the questions why kids want to graduate early, why they want to be homeschooled, why they leave the district? And they get, a lot of them probably are just for, they move or whatever, but that ebb and flow seems very important. And so.
At the high school level, I don't know. I'd have to talk to Matt about whether or not there's some formal process that happens when students ask to leave. I know you know, someone for employees, they, you know, are able to, when I send a letter, thanking them for their service, they can set up and do an exit interview with me, and I quite a bit of those, to sort of help get a sense of their experience. And then in terms of K-8 students, you know, a lot of it is moving, it's shifting, but, you know, as a principal, I never, you know, for the most part, most of the shifts were moving. So I never really, you know, didn't sort of come to mind in terms of asking, but at the high school level is something that I think we did with our guidance department.
Did you have a hand up? No. Any other questions for Mike before we move on to directors and teaching learning? Hey, is that you, Rhonda?
So Mike covered that first part. Are there any other questions about the technology restructuring? I'm gonna jump into Schoology. We have a video to watch.
What did that work? I guess do you want to set up schools a little bit? And then we'll watch this.
Last year, we started looking at Schoology. It's a part of the Power School suite of products. They are doing away with the unified classroom part of their suite. So we started looking at Schoology. The tech people did some research and landed on Schoology being the best. So it kind of takes the place of Google Classroom. It takes the place of the grade book that's in Power School currently. And it should help us with managing communication between families and the school. And an overview.
So this is just a little video of us that sort of describes Schoology, and then we can answer some questions. On March 17th, teachers will be, you know, doing a lot of training around this, the work that the tech team has worked on to get ready and through around for teachers to learn how to do and sort of a thoughtful rollout.
The Marple Newtown School District is located in suburban Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but as of just 3 years ago, had no learning management system known as an LMS.
Really what we were trying to do is not only empower our teachers and our kids, but we were really trying to personalize learning for all of our students in the district. And we felt like Schoology Learning was the best way to help us do that.
Matt Oberecker is the supervisor of instructional technology for the district, who oversaw the selection of Power School Unified Classroom Schoology Learning a few months before the start of the pandemic. When COVID-19 did hit, teachers started using Google Classroom to keep learning afloat, as Schoology Learning hadn't yet been fully implemented.
But the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and we really didn't have anything. We had teachers making PDFs to email home to their kids or printing packets that they would come pick up. We used Google Classroom for a bit, which got us going, kind of like training wheels on a bike. And you know, that summer, we fully implemented Schoology with all of our teachers, K to 12. And so here at this elementary school, you know, our teachers really did the heavy lifting. They were really industrious, learning all the ins and outs of Schoology. And really, we haven't looked back ever since that summer.
Today, Oberecker says Schoology Learning has permeated everything in the district, where it's used daily by almost everyone, including Sean O'Donovan, third grade teacher at Worrell Elementary.
Its initial inception here was to help serve as a digital classroom when we could not be in the building. So I think the sheer fact that elementary teachers are still using it now that we're 100% back in the building speaks to its success, speaks to its ease of navigation and the resources that you have at your fingertips to actually utilize in a non-digital classroom, still in the concrete building.
Schoology Learning is now used by students in 12th grade all the way down to the elementary level. Even the younger students, like Eddie Partridge, say they found it easy to navigate, whether it's on their phone or a laptop.
We use it for most of our students. Yeah, we use it a lot. It felt weird at first. I didn't know how to navigate on it, but we took like a couple Schoology, like how to use tutorials and how. Yeah. Classroom.
But why make that switch from Google Classroom over to PowerSchool's Schoology Learning?
The Schoology really, we believe, personalizes things for our kids. More so than some of the other solutions we looked at, it gives kids the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding in a variety of ways. The ability to have a moderated or a graded discussion post from a teacher is something that Schoology really, that was something that we didn't really see in a lot of other solutions. We can still use our Google Drive. We can still assign things individually. So all the things that teachers worked so hard on pre-pandemic and pre-Schoology, they can still use them, which, as a former teacher, that was something that was important to me.
Oberacker says the ability to handle standards-based mastery also sets Schoology Learning apart.
Schoology Learning really empowers our teachers in a big way when it comes to standards. I mean, as a classroom teacher, we had standard-based report cards, and I remember thinking, how am I supposed to figure out how the kids are doing to all these different standards? Our state has hundreds of different standards across subject areas, and it really is tedious for teachers to have to keep track of every single standard and how kids are performing. So one thing that our teachers do really well in this district, and it's even getting more enhanced as we're bringing performance matters into our district, is the idea that you can tag a standard to individual items, assignments, assessment items, and you can track it using Google Mastery to see exactly how kids are doing throughout the year on a certain standard. That visualization, that data visualization is not something that we had access to previous to Schoology Learning and Performance Matters.
He also touts the solution's parental engagement features, overall course design, and security.
What Schoology Learning did for us was really enhance our ability to communicate with our students remotely, our families remotely. Having that calendar was a really nice thing for schools and for classrooms. We feel like that's one of the things that sets Schoology Learning apart from some of the other solutions that we looked at. Is it's very intuitive, it's very kid-friendly, very K-12, which was a concern for us. Student data and privacy is something that is obviously the law of the land and very important, and it was a big factor in going to Schoology Learning.
It's just easier to navigate and function, and I feel like you can use it to, Google Classroom didn't have your grades posted, but on Schoology we get notifications every time a grade or assignment is posted, and our teachers can send us messages through there, and we have a calendar so that's how.
Oberacker, for his part, is pleased that teachers, students, and parents have all taken to Schoology Learning and benefited so many ways.
We used Google Classroom as sort of like training wheels, learning to ride a bike of an LMS during the early days of the pandemic in 2020. And once we got into Schoology Learning, it was like hopping on a Harley. Then we were like, this is what an LMS is really supposed to be like.
They give us free Schoology.
I see.
I think maybe yeah, so.
So, Schoology, it's something that, actually last year we sort of started, taking a look at it. We had teams of teachers working on it, and to see how to best leverage it for the experience of having, better communication and better workflow, for teachers. And the tech team has been working with Rhonda and Julie to provide that day on the 17th to really give some in-depth work with teachers on its use. So when we start to use it in the fall, that they're ready to implement it. And it's something that the A team uses in terms of how we keep our information in terms of where our resources are, so that, we're not looking in Google Drive. It's very specific of where you can put things, so we can easily get to the things that we need to use. So it was important for us to utilize it through all this year, as it's something we're going to be expecting folks to use and try to communicate through that venue. So I'm really excited for it and appreciate the thoughtful rollout that we're doing, and trying to make sure that it's understood by teachers to be used well. So.
We used the groups feature a lot this year with our common studies, and Julie and I have a teaching and learning group that everyone is part of. So there's resources in there that instead of everything being on the website, there are some documents that not everybody needs, just the people within the district, so those are in that group, and then everything that needs to be forward facing is on the website. And we're still working on the website, but that's a process. That's ever changing.
Is it something like if your student misses a day of school, they go in there and they can see the class, or just at least I'm just trying to understand. I don't really know much about Google Classroom myself, but is that,
You'd be able to see the assignments.
because I thought Google Classroom was like a live thing.
Yeah,
So they just see
both.
assignments, they don't
Right.
see.
It's both. You can have the live piece of it, just like Google Classroom, or you can see the assignments that were delivered, and the same in Schoology. There's a,
So are teachers recording their class every day? Or- No.
But if they have like a video component to their assignment.
Oh,
or something
okay.
like that.
or the document that, or the directions of what they did that day. They could put that, they could post that.
It also helps with the sort of, like, if you were to have events where school had to close for sickness, the ability to pivot, really quickly is something that having everybody utilizing Schoology, having that single platform would be really useful. It's also be really helpful to have information on there around our curriculum. Right now, you can go to our website and sort of see what the standards are, but to be able to have a place where there might be things tagged to a particular aspect of the curriculum that's usable would be really important. And that's another use of that tool. So again, that idea of being able to leverage technology in a way that is really thoughtful and useful, and something that you can put into practice if you need to quickly.
And then, oh, sorry.
So I have a couple of things. First of all, I mean, I see a lot of value in using these programs. It's great, you know, like my daughter just missed 5 days of school. She can go in and she can see what her assignments are, and you know, I get an email that says where she's at with certain classes. But one of the things that I find is there's a lot of variance in how teachers use it. One teacher, you might be able to see every single assignment and every single standard, and the next teacher doesn't update it at all for the entire semester. So I would just say that in whatever we do, it probably would be a good idea to continue to encourage our teachers to use them at an equitable level here, so that, you know, we're not hearing, oh, well, your kid missed all this and we don't know about it because we've gotten used to the idea of following along on Google Classroom. And then just a quick question would be, at what grade level do we start to expect our kids to be in this and using it as a tool?
Well, I met just a couple of weeks ago with a common study leaders, and the really at pre-K 2, it wouldn't necessarily be something that they'd be using every day. There is this nice journal portion, where a portfolio portion where teachers could take pictures of student work or scan student work, and so we could have a digital portfolio for each of those littles. But really, like at 3rd or 4th grade, we'd start a little bit with them and let that ramp up naturally, so that by the time they got to middle school, they have a good experience and good understanding of how the platform works.
Thank you.
I thought, but I guess, you said we're switching to it from Power School.
It's
It's hard. Yeah, we're switching from a piece of Power School to something that they're not supporting any longer to this.
Okay,
So it's all within Power School. So
Okay.
it's,
so, is this taking or changing the reporting structure for report cards? Is this what module, like, how, because we are talking about like Google Classroom, like how, but we're not talking about the report cards. So I want to have a question, you can give me that answer, then I'll have a follow-up.
it doesn't necessarily change the report card, because the report card comes from Power School. So teachers will put scores into Schoology. Schoology talks to Power School, and the report card comes out of Power School. We are talking at the lower grades about a report card that would be more parent friendly and actually give parents the information that they need about their child.
So much follow-up is, thank you for that clarification. I couldn't figure that out. My follow-up is, I know, I understand that we have to make this transition because the piece that we use is going, but I know that we've had a lot of changes and they're very burdensome to teachers, and we've heard that over and over again. And so we're doing this because a piece is going away and we have to.
We have to switch to something.
Okay. And so the other part of that is, I just wonder, like, what is the data transition look like? I don't know what the right word is, but I'm thinking like, who is going in and having to input all this stuff so that it talks to Power School? Like, whose job is that? What training has to happen? We just have a lot of, we are continuously have a lot of changes, which are impactful to the time that's spent not working kids. We're gonna talk about. And so I'm just thinking about that and what that impact looks like on teachers, or are these new data people in their new roles going to be inputting all the things so that teachers aren't doing that, or what does that look like?
The data manager actually has already front loaded a lot of this work because we started with it last year and really trying to get things positioned so that people could start dabbling and using it a little bit this year. A lot of that work was done last year, but she'll continue. The nice thing about Schoology versus the unified classroom is that she doesn't have to upload all the standards there. They're in Power School, so that talking back and forth between Schoology and
So that's already a thing that's in there that just has to be. Okay.
And the other thing too is like she doesn't have to be continually like, if you and I are co-teaching a class, but I'm like the lead teacher, she doesn't have to add you as the lead teacher. I can add you to the class. So some of that administrative stuff is smoothed out.
Are there any resources out there or resources being created to help parents navigate and utilize the platform?
That's part of what the tech team is working.
Anyone else before we move on to our reorganization planning? Okay, Mike has a nice PowerPoint that this sort of will explain the work that the committee and with Mike and Bob Legal have worked on, and it shows sort of why we're reorganizing, which I think everyone on the board is very, while we're attempting to reorganize, is very familiar with. But then it also lays out the 4 models that Rob worked on in all of his number crunching. And the important thing to remember is that it's by state law, it's the reorganization planning committee that would make the decision to proceed ahead with one of these 4 models, or they, theoretically they could whatever they wanted, but we would hope with one of these models, and then ultimately would be up to the voters in each town to approve the recommendation of the reorganization planning committee. So we're more of a free planning committee. So the 4 models sort of, they start, like, I don't want anyone to get alarmed thinking that, I like this or I don't like, or that they just show, our goal was providing the most equity to the most students across the island with our available resources. So they show ways to get at that. Some of them would be much more smooth and easier to attain. Some of them would be a much more significant process to undertake. But I think it's important for the board, the whole board and the community to see sort of what the range of options are. And so that people, so that we're putting all the options on the table.
Across the island and Trenton.
And Trenton, yes, across our AOS community.
And so really, that's a good segue into, if you look, so our current district and the way that we're structured. So, this is who we serve. So you can see Trenton and actually, so you can happen on most students, for high school and the way that we serve them. So this is sort of, those dots represent students from pre-K to 12, and where they live. This is actually from our bus program, so we're able to sort of see where people are and what what grade levels are. So everywhere from the outer islands up to Trenton, and then our high schoolers that come to us. So that's how we serve. That is who we serve. And as Jessica stated, the focus on this was thinking about how to create the most equity and excellence in education within the available resources that we have. And so reorganization wide, and this is sort of part of the work that you have seen and things that have been in the paper as we've talked about it. And the idea is to sort of reorganize our current structure from a collection of individual schools into something more coherent and equitable that better serves our students and our educators within the systems. It makes sense to look at how we can provide the best education for everyone within those resources that we have. And some of the main goals of the work that we talked about as a reorganization committee as we were discussing was, number one, to achieve the greatest level of educational excellence for every single child within our resources. To form one school system for all the MDI region students pre-K through 12, so that every child, no matter where they come from, has equitable access to opportunity and resources to thrive, grow, and become contributing members of the community. We sort of talked and met with folks about governance structure, and those can be very complicated with weighted voting, to something as simple as a regional board that could be made up between 8 and 16 members elected regionally with town residency as a requirement. For example, it could be one individual from every town, or it could be 2 individuals from every town in terms of making up that AOS board. And then if you were living in Bar Harbor, you could vote for a person who might be a Southwest Harbor person. So it's that getting at that one person, one vote.
But all board members would serve the whole, I mean, in a lot of ways, we de facto operate that way, but it would be like the whole island and Trenton, the whole district community would vote for every single, would have the opportunity to vote for every single board member. So if Lily was an elected member and she's from Bar Harbor, she isn't just representing Bar Harbor, she's representing the entire district.
As part of that process, as you've seen before, when the board has explored, is that we have to eliminate the high school private and special act as we become one full district rather than so 9 individual districts that we are, to create one budget that is shared equitably, so that no matter which community you live in, the value of your property means that you will pay the same amount towards education, which would be voted on at an annual regional budget. And one of the tools that our group created with the help of Rob Weevil was a model to be able to take a look at that funding formula and what that might look like based on what you create, so that looking at the value of your home, no matter where you live, you would pay a similar amount to the cost of education.
Fine point on that. So if I live in Southwest Harbor and I own a house worth $450,000, my tax contribution towards the education is going to be the same as if, Bo lives in Trenton and he owns a house worth $150,000.
To become a single employer, to better support the needs of staff, both professionally, economically, and educationally. And to strategically meet the building needs that we have across our new district and how to manage those needs. The outcomes, to have stronger and better coordinated curriculum experiences across our schools, to more efficiently design special education program services to all of our students, to have greater access to extra and co-curricular activities, and for more opportunities for students to form successful peer groups and be grouped for teaching in a manner that best meets their needs. And that goes for teachers in terms of having peers within grade levels. You see some of that through the various models. And to be more efficient use of our physical resources. And so model 1. And so, the various models that you could dream up, we kind of came up with 4 that, you know, we would hand over to the RPC to sort of think about. Model 1 would be to have 5 pre-K, 5 district elementary schools. One would be located in Bar Harbor, and that would have elementary students from Bar Harbor and Mount Desert. The other would be located in Tremont and have Tremont and Southwest students, and then those numbers correspond to what you know, the population would be of those schools. And then you would have Trenton as a pre-K 5 school, Swans and Cranberry. Frenchboro kind of left out because when you start looking at the ability to have students attend on-island schools, the communities of Swans and Cranberry, that's a little bit easier in terms of being able to have maybe some sense of back and forth, but Frenchboro would sort of still act as a you know, a K school on its own. Model 1 has 2 middle schools, 6-8 district middle schools. One would be housed in Pematic and would have Tremont students, Southwest, Swans, and Trenton, with a total of 141 students. And then the other middle school would be at Mount Desert, potentially with Bar Harbor, Mount Desert, and Cranberry kids. Model 2 was having 7 pre-K 5 middle schools, and this is actually Model 3 is one that has been talked about in the past. And so you can see the breakdown. We would have pre-K 5 schools in Bar Harbor, and Tremont, Trenton, Pematic, Mount Desert, Swans, and Cranberry. Then you would have 1 new 6-8 district middle school, and that would be the potential total population of a 6-8 middle school within the district. And then Model 3 would be pre-K 6 schools, and you can see those corresponding numbers. And then 1 7-8 district middle school, and this is something that the board has seen presentations on in the past. And then Model 4, and when we were talking, if you know we were to be building a system from scratch, you know, what would be the dream in terms of thinking about the most equitable programming you would have? And that would be 1 pre-K 5 school, 1 6-8 middle school, and we are to have a high school. And then you'd have your 3 unabridged islands would be pre-K 5, and as we said, those you know, Swans and Cranberry, there are ways of making those connections for the middle school students, which we're already sort of thinking about for Cranberry. And even within Model 4, there are, you know, other things that you can do in terms of thinking about early childhood learning. But that sense of, you know, what could it be if you were just sort of thinking, you know, what you could create, and so that's Model 4. So the next steps, you know, one of the next steps would be for this board to meet and to do a workshop on reorganization and talk a little bit more in depth in a facilitated discussion about what our options are. Then after that, we would do, you know, each of the boards had agreed to sort of start these discussions at the level with the reorganization committee group, but then to vote to actually sign a notice of intent to form a regional planning committee. And it's important to remember, I think we've discussed this at the individual board meetings, is that filing does not commit a school committee to join an RSU. This is about the discussion process to come up with an idea that makes sense based on the work that we've been doing for the last number of years of what makes the most sense for our students. And the RSU, that regional planning committee is made up of a board member from each school, a municipal officer from that town, community member, and maybe some other members within the community, whether that's teachers or others, to represent other folks in terms of what that work we would need to do to take a look about, you know, what the future can hold. The RPC would then meet regularly and develop a plan. They have to have, the law says you have to have at least 1 community meeting. I see having many more community meetings, so I'm discussing, particularly once you come up with an option, because it's something that voters will vote on, so you have to pick an option. I would sense that you would have some meetings prior to that and more discussion, and then meetings once you flush something out. And then there would be a vote in each town, at a referendum of whether or not to join. Part of the process of the RPC is you have to have a plan. Like if someone doesn't join, what does that look like? So you have to sort of have that as part of the plan.
What I'm gonna recommend, because we have the calendar discussion and some big, the calendar discussion, and our time is running short, that we could take maybe like 5 questions or something, but that we really, I think there's a lot here for people to digest, and you can review this in your agenda, but that we save our fuller discussion for the board workshops. I think that would be a more effective use of our limited time.
And I'll have, some of the attach it to the agenda so you can just go in.
So you can peruse it before we do the board workshop. So, with that said, are there a few questions? Or we can move on? Marie?
Yeah, I was gonna say too, one is the board workshop, and what is the timeline if this were like, what is the anticipated timeline if it were like a fast track timeline for us to get to votes at each town meeting? Like 2 years more worth of work, 1 more budget cycle worth of work, 7
I
more
think
years
that-
worth of work.
I mean, it depends a lot on what the RPC does, but I think there's no scenario where there would be, where it would go to town warrants before 23.
2023.
2024.
Okay.
Excuse me, so I think we're-
That would be like,
Losing track of our years.
I know,
Yeah,
it's
it's a lot.
already 2023. That would be like the fastest, but also sort of
But
like
I think-
reasonable that would happen.
That's the, yeah, that would be,
That would be like the fastest.
but that's unlikely. I think 2025 is a more realistic possibility.
When's the workshop?
We have not.
No, that's we'll have a date this week.
Is there a proposed location for the unified middle school 6 through 8?
Not in this thing, because, that we haven't, in the original, when there was a previous middle school committee, the discussion was about having it on this. Not in this building, but obviously, but on this campus site. But yes, but the, like site planning and so forth hasn't been done, so that would have to be done for that. To be determined.
I have one more, you may have barely answered this.
Go ahead.
Is there any model in which a town wouldn't need a building in their town anymore for education? Based on the numbers that we
Well-
have in this scenario?
So I'm gonna, but we model for towns, but not necessarily, I don't think that's a likely outcome of the RPC, but yeah, we model for.
Other than model for, yeah.
But no, except for Model 4.
Right, yeah. Okay. Moving on to first discussion items, first reading of policy, family and medical leave. This is, we attached to MSNA recommended policy and that refocus.
And again, this was changes in the law for family medical leave, so it's just sort of updating those pieces and kind of specifying in terms of what that leave could be used for. And so the policy committee said that we would like to use the MSMA model.
Unless someone has an objection, I think we could take a motion on this because there's not, they're primarily involved.
It's just MSMA. Don't move acceptance of. No, I'm not.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're okay taking a discussion item and acting on it?
Unless there's an objection.
Okay. So I move we approve the GBN family medical leave as written in the agenda. Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Okay. Moving on, our next item is the calendar, and before we start into the calendar, we have a lot of public comment, and I know feelings run high on the calendar issue. So I want to remind people that on either, if you support, people who support early release are supporting it because they think it's what's going to provide the best education for kids. So they think it's going to give kids the best chance of succeeding. I think it's the right choice. People who oppose it also think it's going to provide the best education for kids, and it's going to be best for, I think on both sides of this debate, people are coming at it from wanting to do what's going to be right for kids. So I want to encourage people to bring the temperature down a little bit, because, we are all trying to come up with a calendar that's going to give us a chance to provide the best for our kids, and it's going to work for families. And, I also saw a couple public comments that says, that maybe we're not transparent. So for that reason, I'm going to propose that we don't entertain a motion, that we wait until next month to make any kind of vote on that, so that people have the opportunity to contact us if they, want to weigh in. And I want to say, speaking for myself as the chair, people are more than welcome at any time. I don't see her here now, but to call me or email me on my school board email, and I will be happy to, put that out for public comment and share that. So, our goal is to be transparent to the community. So people, absolutely, if you have a concern, you see something on the school board agenda, please come and comment. Please be in touch with me or Mike, or one of your local board chairs, whatever works for you, because the goal is to, to hear from the community. So with that, I'll let Mike take it away.
Thank you. So as you recall, back in January, and even before that, the idea of an early release happening on a regular basis has sort of been floating around calendar discussions, probably since 2017, 18, and various models have been floated, and surveys have gone out to parents for discussion. And then this past January, as I shared at our board meetings, I said that I was going to be sharing more information for the month, so you had time to sort of think about it. And then those questions from that January meeting created the document on the rationale that came from Julia, Rhonda, and myself, and the folks in my office to sort of paint that picture for everybody. And then we made sure that we put this rationale on everybody's individual agenda, so that we had opportunity to talk in small groups about the pros and cons of this work, and why that we feel from the central office that this is an important step to take. And so I think that's been a really good process in terms of laying out and making sure that we've had time to sort of think about it in a manner, and not just act upon it at one meeting, and sort of hear what that rationale is. I'd like to take a moment to sort of address some of the pieces in terms of the public comment, in terms of a recognition that the MTSS, the multi-tier system of supports, is for all kids. It's not for a small subset of kids. It's for every student, because there are times in our educational careers when we were coming up, there were times when math was really hard in middle school. We might have gotten it in elementary school, and then we get to middle school and we start dealing with abstracts of pre-algebra, and our brains aren't ready for it, and all of a sudden we're not doing really well. And we might have done well all the way along. And so the MTSS process is a process to help that student who all of a sudden is kind of struggling, even though the year before they didn't, to be able to get it and make those gains.
And it's not special ed, it's regular ed.
It's regular ed, it's for any student, and it might be for the student who's looking for more of a challenge. So MTSS is for all kids. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear. The other piece I wanted to be able to make clear, and I think I said it at the January meetings, and I think I said it at every single board meeting, except for Trenton, because your meeting's tomorrow, but I sent the rationale to everybody and met with Jennifer. We talked a little bit about it at that level. That's the one school I haven't been able to get to because of scheduling. But that this proposal is for an hour and a half. It's not a half a day, so I can't say that in more ways that this is for an hour and a half on a Wednesday, not a half a day. So I think that's really important. And one of the things that we had talked about in terms of that time commitment is that when we built the schedule, and I have a version of the calendar to be able to look at, and I'll pass it out so people have it to look at, since we're not acting today, is that we were sort of thoughtful and thinking about the beginning of the school year, recognizing that you need to connect and make sure those first couple of weeks are solid through. Also looking at the end of the year and making sure that we're not doing early releases up until that last week of school, that there's some things that happen in classrooms that's really important. We also took a look at our shortened weeks. So anytime that there's a holiday, that we made sure that on those holiday weeks where there are 4 days, that there'd be no early release on those days. So in trying to manage all of those particular needs, I think it was really important, for us to be thoughtful and sort of looking at that approach. I think in the time that we had spoke, I think the most important thing is that there's that question of time with students. And in our rationale, we sort of talk about the work that we have done with kids overall and how we've worked to try to meet the needs of students and teachers. And one of those things have been through where we might pull a teacher out of a class to do some common study work, to be able to do that tier 1 instructional work, to get the professional development they need. As you know, in our proposal, some of those Wednesdays are for district-based work, and that district-based work is focused on the common study teams that Rhonda was talking about. And we had some common study teams here last week. Those teachers are working, so there were 3 teachers doing really important work that's going to further develop their teaching skills, so when they're in front of students, that they're doing a much better job of meeting those kids' needs. In our proposal, we want to limit the times that we have teachers out, and we sort of kind of looked at how many hours students were without a certified teacher, and that's in that right-hand column of our rationale when you get to the end and take a look at what that looks like. And so if we don't have the time to do it, those are some of the creative ways that, you have to do that work to be able to get the work done. It's stuff that we've done in the past, but I don't think it's as known as an early release might be. You might not know that your kid didn't have, that teacher that day because they were at a common study working on strengthening your skills. And so having this as a regular occurrence provides that time so that we have to do that less. One of the questions that sort of came up is we sort of talked about, if we were to extend an hour and a half a day and pay for teachers to do that work for an extra 90 minutes, somewhere within the week. And I had sort of Nancy pull those numbers of what that would look like. And for our K-8 schools, because this is a K-8, pre-K-8 proposal, it would cost about $500,000, spread out or through all of our budgets in terms of a total cost to the district in terms of adding that extra time. And then I have to break down to school. I can share those with the individual school boards of what that sort of looks like, and if you were to add that or pay for that extra time. And I guess I would just sort of close before sort of questions are, come out is, I think that, we thought real hard about, what we're trying to do and how we want to move the work forward in a way that supports students so that, within that process that all students are being lifted. And that we're also providing that needed time for our teachers to work together. We work really hard to remove silos in terms of our classrooms and getting teachers to work together. And I think in January, Gail kind of spoke about the sort of the medical model and how they get together during the day in terms of being able to make sure that they're meeting the needs of their patients in a way, utilizing their expertise within that professional model. We're sort of thinking of it in sort of the same way of how we, best support our kids. we've done a lot of talking over the last month at those board meetings. I don't know if there was any more, but I'm sure that, folks may still have questions that you might want me to address, some more in my team, and that we would be happy to do.
Gail?
I have to say that last month, you introduced this topic and said, I just want to give you a heads up that we're going to want to talk about this. And it's a proposal that we're going to bring before you. And I witnessed our board take off at about 90 miles an hour. And in some cases become extremely reactive in ways that I see amplified through many of the public comments. And I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that so quickly the conversation, and I think so unnecessarily, the conversation became strident and in some cases just angry, in some cases inaccurate. And I'm glad that we've had this month, and at least the boards have had this month to have conversations individually as boards about what's being proposed, because it isn't as radical as it may have sounded or is being portrayed, and what the impact might be. So I hope that we can have this conversation in a less fraught manner than I'm just stunned at how quickly the temperature's gone to near boiling over something that is not going to lead to a good decision if we act that way. So I'll just leave it at that. That's not me. To me, that's the process is as important as what we ultimately do about this.
Any other questions? Lily?
I have a question. I guess I don't fully understand, like, when you brought it to us, I was envisioning that when a student was having an issue, your teacher was pulled out of the classroom to talk with maybe another professional or a consultant or something to what's the best next step for that student. But what you're saying, what I'm understanding tonight is it's more that they're taken out of the classroom for 1 or 2 days at a time for professional training. Is that what it's that?
Teacher or the student?
The teacher. But I'm trying to figure out like what, I guess I just want to be sure if we shorten a day at 1 o'clock every Wednesday, are we certain that teachers aren't going to be pulled out of the classrooms or whatever the?
Is that going to reduce the amount that they're pulled out of other?
Yes.
Yeah, so the idea of ending at 1:30. And then the idea is to, yes, have fewer of those, those common studies where teachers are needing to be pulled out of the classroom to do the work on implementing certain programs. So that's why part of those early releases were that one of those days a month was a district-based discussion. So it goes back to that work that we've been doing with these common studies teams, revamping them to strengthen tier 1 instruction of what's happening in the classroom and give the teachers support to do that. In years past, that has happened through having to take them out of the classroom for a day with their cohorts to work on specific projects. This proposal, we're hoping to do less of that, so that when the student is in the classroom, they have a certified teacher more often. And again, that was less visible. That was just doing the work of schools. That's what happens in schools regularly in terms of being able to get some of the work done. But you may not have, it's not as visible as saying we're going to take this hour and a half to be able to do this more on a regular basis to support teachers.
I was just totally misunderstanding the logistics of what you were. Even though I listened, but I didn't quite get it, but now I do. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
So I just, from our last conversation, I just wanted to make sure we were talking about this reduction would also remove some of the calendar half days that pop up throughout the school year, right? Like on the monthly calendar where we close early on a Friday, like this coming Friday, for example, that would eliminate some of these throughout the calendar year, right? So even out the schedule overall, but it's going to be evened out by a Wednesday being reduced.
Other than right now, parent-teacher conferences, there's 2 of those. There's one in October and April. Those would remain because that's part of that.
Yep.
The way we do parent teacher conferences and like we so think about changing those. Other than that, there's no more of those. There's either a full day PD or there's, the weekly early and some Wednesdays.
Problem two, and then.
I have two comments and one question. The 500,000, the 500,000, you said, was that based on all the teachers needing to stay? Do we assume that all the teachers need to stay if we were paying the extra 90 minutes? Like, are we thinking like special teachers need to stay for these things? Okay.
Yeah, and you can ask a question too, because I think you missed our Bar Harbor
Yes.
discussion, so I'll
Yeah.
answer question one if you want now.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when you read through the sort of vignette, part of the idea of when the teams are meeting to talk about student needs, oftentimes you'll have to find time within the school day, whether it's the scenario of working on math, so when are you going to find time to be able to work on those skills? And so having everybody there allows you to discuss, maybe that student is, really needs PE class. So you want to stay away from that, and that teachers can talk about that. But the other specialist teachers might be able to say, well, they could probably, for the 6 weeks or whatever time frame the intervention will occur, they might miss that little bit of the class so that they can get the support that they need. And so having those teachers there would be really important as part of those discussions.
And then as far as the transparency thing goes, for a couple of years, we've asked for the agendas to be placed in our newsletters. And that has not happened. And people don't always know when we have meetings, they don't go out to see our agendas. So I really feel like we need to have
Take charge and.
yeah, that needs to be, and maybe even bullet points, so, right, and maybe even bullet, hey, these are topics that were,
Those are and
hot
maybe not,
issues.
but I don't, maybe it's just school by school.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe,
I mean, I know they are.
yeah. And then my other, I'm not sold on this, but if it were to happen, at least at Connors Emerson, on Fridays, there are no sports typically. So Wednesday, I feel like we're taking kids an hour and a half out of school earlier for them to come back to school or the field or wherever it is that they need to get back to. I just feel like Fridays would be a better afternoon because we typically don't have sports in the afternoon or after school activities going on. So that's just those are my.
We thought about that in terms of whether or not, because right now Fridays sort of been an agreement that that they don't do sports. You can either transition and say, well, now Wednesday is the day that you don't have those practices for K, but you do have them on Friday, so you can even make the switch that way. And I think that some of the boards we sort of talked about that, even during the regular season, there are times where your kid has to go home and then you have to bring them back for their sport, and that sort of cycles through depending on sometimes the flip-flops. Mostly during basketball and probably softball season, we have multiple teams happening. So, we've had those problems and tried to tackle them. The first thought of it, the way to solve that one was well, maybe we can just sort of switch the game that there aren't practices and make that on Friday and then so Wednesday, then it wouldn't be an issue.
We talked about Friday.
Oh, and when you look overall at a monthly breakdown of attendance for staff and students for that matter, your Mondays and Fridays, regardless of whether it's an early release, those are days that, you see more people out. Wednesdays, there are more adults in the building, so that means you're probably, better able to capture. Because if people aren't feeling well, all sorts of reasons why Fridays or Mondays might be a day that you have higher absentee rates, but Wednesday had fewest absentee rates. And so you're probably more assured to have the individuals at those meetings to make those decisions than you would be on a Monday or a Friday or wherever else.
Curtis and.
I have a lot of questions, but I'll wait because we haven't had our. meeting
Yeah,
yet,
we
but-
can tomorrow.
Yeah. This isn't for the high school, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
This is just for the community.
And I mean, has there been call me selfish, I don't know, what, like. 3 o'clock is, hard enough for if two parents work. What are we supposed to do at 1:30? Middle of the week, like. I don't know. It's-
Yeah, I know as a dad with two kids, well, long ago. But those are decisions, those are things that I had to make when my children's school had these days, and those, so that's sort of part of the process. We have thought about, and we have reached out to, our community partners to see what options are available. I think, some of the discussions that we had at some of the schools, sort of talked about, the idea of, libraries participating or other things that might be going on to support kids. To be able to help support parents.
Just to
But,
bridge that, like,
yeah. And like you said, school ends at 3 o'clock and
Right.
most of our jobs don't end at 3 o'clock. And so.
correct, which I'm thankful for, Trenton has after school Tuesday through Thursday. and
Yep.
Most days, we need to utilize that, but I was just wondering if there was a plan to possibly bridge that hour and a half if needed for some,
It would be interesting to get an understanding of the need, and that's something that I think, we could do, because in other places where they have transitioned and have done this work, I think it depends on the community of whether or not what the need was. In some places it was a smooth transition, in other places, depending on your community, there might be, more than.
the rest I'll ask tomorrow.
Jamie, then Gary.
Yeah, I was just, and I might be confused because when we just, in the rationale document, when we had our meeting, all the rationale around the MTSS or the RTI, which is the same thing, which is very student specific, student, individual student plans and budgets for growth, right? And I think what you just brought up is there's also a professional development element to this, which that time in this sort of calendar of time, which I just looked at, that's not broken down at all. And I think you're saying that it replaces, so in addition to the professional development days in the calendar, you're now saying that there are times when teachers are pulled out of classes to do professional development and non-certified teachers are put in. And so if you're, I'm assuming that time is tracked. So that's a rationale that's not included in this would be helpful to understand how much time that is normally, right? So if that actually happens, like, is that 10 hours a year? Is it?
I think it's at the end of the document, at the end in that green, that's where we sort of lay that out, so that's sort of listed today.
Well, right, this is just full day professional development. This doesn't have the,
At the end, it says, like in 2018, 2019, the total hours for professional development with the early releases that were done there, the parents to be conferences were a total of 79 hours, 20 hours were without a certified teacher. So that's that piece where you are pulling groups of teachers out to do some of that work. And then for the 2022-23 school year, there are probably 17 when you look at our current calendar. Oh no, yeah, the current calendar, it's about 17 hours without a certified teacher. So when we looked at the time that we were doing some of these common studies and added those up for the year, that's what that is. And our proposal for next year is to try to limit that to just 3 hours, because there are some, particularly math lab site work that happens where teachers actually watch other teachers, and some of that work has been really important. So in thinking about the amount of time a teacher might be out, that's why we think in this new calendar that we'd be able to do more of the work like some of the district teams did last week. They could do those during that early release time rather than the time that they were out, because it'd be happening more regularly.
the 3 hours per student, like cumulative, like, what is that
I think that was cumulative.
in total for all the teachers in the district through the
3 hours per teacher,
per teacher,
per math teacher.
per math teacher? Okay. I'm trying to do the math in my head, because it's, so if we're taking an hour and a half Does the math work? I tried to do it quickly in my head.
Well, no, we're saying that those the 3 hours that are shown there, that's
Right.
probably what will happen. For, let's say, a math teacher, they're gonna do a lab site, so you'll have a math teacher who will be out of a classroom for no more than 3 hours.
The number in
year.
parentheses specifically refers to approximate number of hours that a non-certified teacher is in the classroom while the main teacher.
While the main teacher has something.
Well, how many weeks are covered in this?
The total number of weeks within the school year, which is.
So that's not, that 3 isn't a weekly total, right? That's
Well,
It's not a
your
week,
total
it's
for the year.
a ballpark for the year.
I'm just trying to back into it, because if it's 30 weeks, let's just say, and it's an hour and a half a week, right, which is our early dismissal. Then whereas you're saying you're reducing it from 20 hours or 17 to 3, so 14 of the. So more than half the time is going to professional development versus to student
I think
specific.
it's referring to cutting down the amount of time the teacher will be able to go to the class. I don't think it's like a literal lateral number. I don't think.
But it. Okay. If we're projecting that this year, teachers will pull out 17 hours in total per student. And then it goes to 3, we're reducing that by 14 per student. That time's going somewhere. You're saying that time's going to the hour and a half early release. So if the hour and a half early release times 30 weeks, then. So it's not half,
I
it's
don't
more
think
than a third goes to, I'm trying,
Map onto each other, so it's like, most of these are RTI, but then there's the one month that's a common study, so I think, I understand what you're getting at, but I think it's a little bit of an apples to oranges.
okay. I mean, but I'm not, the numbers are the numbers of the chart,
But I
so
think the
they're
case
going
being
from
made is-
somewhere.
The case that that's being made is that this proposal will make it more efficient in a way that will affect the amount of time that just have to be in the classroom. Which means not
So they'll have to do
quantified.
less professional development.
Well, the time for the district-based early release once a month. They'll be able to do, that work more regularly so that there'll be there'll be less need to pull them out for those other pieces. As we look at the work that we want to do in terms of any of the professional development in the sort of the tier 1 instruction.
What I was trying to back into based on this is, again. And this isn't apples to oranges, this is apples to apples, is what percentage of this time that we're asking to give up on the calendar will be student MTSS RTI specific versus professional development?
Oh,
What
now I get
percentage?
that question. I don't-
That's because I'm trying to back it in based on these numbers, it's.
I understand now.
Okay. Is it more than that? And based on these numbers, it seems like it's 60% of the student specific for professional development.
So the district base, there will be, for the school based, there'll be 16-hour-and-a-half school based times. So you do, that math in terms of
64 times an hour.
right,
And those are
16 times
MTSS.
that. Those are the school based, that's the MTSS, so in terms of school based. And then it's 9, there'll be 9 district based. Those are the teacher. Those are focused on the common studies.
Which
So
supports,
if I
still
add
support
16
that.
plus 9.
Yeah.
Tier 1. Scale and then, Carrie and then Dale, sorry.
Yeah, mine is, kind of similarly, trying to understand the numbers in here. And if I'm reading this correctly, we're then saying that we're only, with these early releases, only increasing the total number of hours kids are out of school by 6 hours. Is that right? The 88.5 to 94.5 in the last column? Or is this number, how many hours of,
That 88.5 is the total hours of PE and early release that is within that calendar year.
right? So we're saying that right now, this year, the kids are out for personal
No.
development and other things for 88.5 hours, right?
But that 88 hours includes the regular professional development, so it's a mix of.
Right, but it's a total,
So
is
it's a total.
88.5 hours. And the total, the new calendar would be 94.6, 94.5.
No, it's not the kids out though. It's the
That's not-
teachers out.
I think
The kids are in the room. They just don't have a certified teacher in.
But that's only the 3 hours, right?
No,
See,
Sounds
that-
like-
this is-
it
this is
sounds like we need
confusing.
clarification about the hours for the next meeting, because it seems like we're confused about. We're confused about percentage of RTI and percentage of professional development hours, and we're confused about. What I think would be helpful to know is the total number of hours that kids are in school without this, and the total number of hours that kids are in school with it. I think that would be a clarifying number. That
That is possible.
Does that answer some of the timing questions?
Well, I think it'll make it more clear, yeah, because, I mean, this chart is great if we understand it. It's just, if it's not clear to us, then it's gonna be really hard.
If yours
For it
is
to be-
not understood by.
Yeah, it's really gonna be hard for people who aren't sitting in these meetings and having the chance to ask and comment. Because part of what I wanted to say was that I feel like, you know, the tone of so many of the letters is it's misunderstanding of what we're asking for. You know, every single one of those letters talked about this as being special education. It's not special education. I'm really glad you guys clarified that at the beginning. Because this is taking our special ed kids, it's taking our regular ed kids, it's taking our high flyers, it's giving all of them more of what they need education.
And it is focused on tier one, like regular ed.
Right. And so I think it's really important for people who are upset about this to understand. Because it just seems clear in those letters that there's that misconception. And I still do have my concerns about making sure that there are options for the kids, but I think the rationale behind what we're doing is very strong, and I know our principals, at least at Tremont, our principal highly supports it. I think principals across the board support this and feel it's a need for the students,
Yeah.
for their best education.
I'll call on Gail, and I wonder if it would be possible before you have a vote on the next meeting, if there could be like a really bulleted FAQ that could be available to the board, but also to put out on the website for parents and community members who want to understand, so that people can have a little bit more information to think about when they're making a decision. I mean, when they're coming to an opinion, but then also if we can have if there's, I don't know, a way to clarify these numbers a little bit, make them a little bit easier to understand. I mean, I think it would be really nice to see that absolute totals of hours kids are in school with the two different proposals and then, yeah. Gail and then you.
Thank you. So as I understand the purpose of this, is that we have worked for decades to try to get to a place where schools are actually not just doing standardized tests, not just doing assessments that don't mean anything, but that schools are continuing to try to develop ways of looking at in real time at what kids are and are not succeeding with, and attempting in real time to sort of micro manage what it is that they're offering these children, our children, so that they can then keep moving forward in a good way. And we have provided an enormous amount of resources that didn't exist not that many years ago. We have math specialists, we have reading specialists, we have behaviorists, we have social workers, we have a whole panoply of services that you can't meaningfully and productively leverage if they can't communicate with one another in real time about real individual kids and figure out how to do the best job that they can to help those kids move forward. And what I'm taking away from what this proposal is that this is an attempt to ground more completely the work that teachers are doing with one another, focusing on individual students, their challenges, their strengths, their interests, and not just saying, we're gonna deal with kids on this end of the spectrum and this end of the spectrum, and everybody else just gets lumped in the middle, and we teach the middle, and hopefully you get it. So that's the lens that I'm seeing it through, and I would appreciate somebody correcting me if I'm wrong about that, but that's the supposition I'm making about the motivation behind this proposal.
Can I just make a quick request?
Yes, and then, you know.
So at our meeting, Rhonda had some really good information to share that I think was from her past experience. Is
Which
it
I think she
possible?
shared at every one of the local
But,
board meetings.
but not, people didn't necessarily see the local board
Oh.
meetings. So I'm wondering if we could take a minute and just have Rhonda share that so that people who are watching on the recording.
Sure.
Thank you.
In my previous life, in a previous district, when I was a teacher, we went through the same process. And I was a high school math teacher, worked for a larger district. The work of MTSS is not easy. It's very complicated, as I think people are wrapping their heads around. And we partnered with the Maine Math and Science Alliance, and for 2 years had a grant where we worked with them and got professional development through them. And we did that during the school day, and it was during our planning time. And we would come together, and even though we received really good professional development, it didn't translate into improvement with our students. And so, and that was happening, you know, different things similar to that were happening all over the district and all over the high school. And so as a district, we looked at other districts and who other districts do, and having an early release where professionals can come together and coalesce on a common belief about teaching and learn from one another, and read books and have conversations and bring people in to talk about best practice, and we developed common assessments and then looked at the data. And Mike and I are both teaching geometry, and his numbers are way better than mine. Mike, what did you do to teach that? Because I want to learn from you. We had those conversations, and that happens on a very limited basis when you don't have early release. Having professional development that is consistent over time is much better than that one and done professional development. So as we worked as a group and coalesced on a common vision, what we found was that Algebra 2 is, we call it a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper class. You don't get through Algebra 2 in high school. You are limited to what you can do when you get out of high school. So we wanted more students passing Algebra 2. When we started this, we only had 60.5% of our kids getting through Algebra 2 or a higher course. And year 5, we had 78%. And in year 6, we were at 75. So it does take time. That was one of the measures that we used to make sure that those early releases were doing what we had intended them to do. The other piece was when we went into this, you could graduate from that high school and not take a high school level math class. You had to have 3 credits. We taught what was called Math 1, was whole numbers and decimals. Math 2 was how to work with fractions, and Math, and like a Math 3 was basically pre-algebra. Instead of having kids leaving without ever experiencing any high school math, we did away with those. We put in course classes where kids could be supported, recognizing that some kids just need more time and support. And so people going into high school were starting at the lowest Algebra 1. So we did that, and we supported students, and even though they were taking more difficult courses, we went from a 21% failure rate to 9.9. And it was because of early release.
Thank you, Rhonda, Marie, and then I think we probably have time for like maybe a couple, like, two more comments, and then I think what I'm hoping is that Mike can get these questions and FAQ or something to people in the next few days or week or something that,
We'll get it before, the break.
yeah, so that people can look at it and be prepared to, clarify their, to answer their questions and be ready to tackle it at the next, board meeting.
Yeah, I have some unrelated comments and maybe not related to, they're related to the topic, but they're not necessarily related on a one-to-one to what we're reading about. They're slow. That's it. One is, I just wanna try to maybe address like the temperature question, like as a board member and as a parent, like it is not surprising to me that the temperature was raised on this. Because it's really hard to live here. Like we all know this, right? It's really hard to, and it gets harder almost like every day. And it's really hard to, especially if you don't have a job, or you're a single parent, that you have a job that you have like vacation time or sick time or any flexibility, whatever. So I'm not disappointed that the temperature was raised and that was the phrase that you used. I'm just not surprised. These are really impactful decisions that we are making. And I know all the things we do are really impactful, but when there's a topic and I've said this before, when there's a topic that's related to the calendar or to the time that our kids are in school, we have to put a red flag on the phone. We have to make sure it's more than just us asking for it to be in the newsletter or us making sure that everybody, reads their agenda. We owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the parents, we owe it to the teachers to get that information out in front of the parents' eyes as early and often, so that we can let them know that we already know that this is a tough thing and we're going to be making some really tough decisions. So I just feel like we have to keep doing that. And obviously we can't keep doing these things, but we have to put this stuff out in front of people. Because what I read in those letters was like a feeling of desperation. Like, what am I supposed to do? I can't leave at this time. And this is impactful to me. And they're not looking at the chart because they don't understand it either. They're looking at what does this mean for like my day-to-day life. It's already hard enough to make ends meet. What am I doing with my kid? So I just want to say that. I think the other thing is maybe because we didn't get out the information in a succinct way early and often. I'm not surprised that there is like misunderstanding of what this is about. There's a lot of information that's really, really good. But I'm not surprised that some people think that are even supporting it, that are like, oh, there's no other PD days. That's great. We'll just do the half day. Like there's even misconceptions about what this is. People even think there's not going to be any more PD days, any fewer PD days. No, we're just going to have this, get it all done in one shot, which was also reflected in the survey that was put out 3 years ago pre-COVID. That was, I feel, flawed. So we shouldn't be surprised about these reactions. We should look at them and say we understand why we have them, because we have to do a little bit better job of getting these important things out in front of parents, especially when they're so impactful to their lives, to our lives. I think another thing is, again, I would love to have seen the actual calendar. Like I want to see it, the physical printout. I've tried to start mocking it up for myself, but I think that visuals, that's important for people to see. That's really hammer home what this looks like and how impactful it is. And then I think to myself, like, how can we responsibly pass this without knowing what the need is for people's after school? I know we've heard that there's a need. We know there's a need. People may not even realize they have a need yet, because they're not thinking it through, but how can we vote on this next month if we don't even know who are the kids that we need to take care of? Who are the families we need to find free or no cost or low cost childcare for? I don't know how we can do that without knowing how impactful that is to people and the stress level that they are going to put on a lot of families. I mean, regardless if you work at the Jackson Lab and you have all of these, sick days, or you work as an hourly person where you don't get any. I just struggle how we can pass that without having data and answers to solve that problem. And I guess my last thing is, what are the other options? Like, what are the other options for this? Again, I've always said, since you noticed about it at the last meeting, I don't disagree. I see the need. I understand there's a need. We've heard there's a need for the extra time in all the ways that you talked about how to be used. But what are the other options? This is our only option. I'm really struggling with it. And I wish we had other options in front of us. Because this is very, very impactful in so many ways for families. And places really hard to live. Really hard to make another one.
So I think we should probably allow them, we should probably just wrap it up and awaiting, and maybe we can make sure that they do go out for families. There.
I think my point is pretty brief. It was really powerful to hear from teachers on this. Like that was like a part that I was missing until our 2-month meeting. I'm already a parent. I already know that it's really hard to get back for the bus, but I feel like we were to get back 2 months for the bus. And so I totally see what Maria's saying, what everybody, it's a huge ask. Hearing from the teachers and how overwhelmed and emotional, I mean, in terms of temperature, they were like, the feeling in that meeting was like, they were feeling pretty desperate for this time. Like they are not getting to talk to each other, not getting to collaborate at all. So that was really powerful for me. And I think it's like, I wish there were no desperation in this at all. That would be really great, but it felt pretty heavy on both sides. And so I think, to speak to what Maria is saying and others are saying, like we must, I have no answer for this, but we have to present like a codified plan, like a programming option that is like really actually built in and not just like an optional, if you want to sign up for her, perhaps you can. I think that's not going to cut it. I know it's only an hour and a half, but I think there's got to be, I support the plan, and I also think we have to like present something like really comprehensive and sort of built in. Like I don't think it can be just like piecemeal.
So can I add that to your? The after school options from something less vague to something more like this after school thing this Trenton after school can provide that 1:30 to 3 coverage for X number of kids or whatever, or
Which may
this.
not be feasible, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know if they will
Right.
be able to not, but it'd be helpful to know our house can accept this many people, for each school. I think that would be a realistic, more precise assessment would be really critical for this.
I was gonna say that earlier before you, but I feel like we can't really ask our community to support this unless we have a way to support them through it. That's how I feel. Like it's, for me, I don't have little kids anymore, and when I first read it, I heard the need, I completely believe in it, and then I went away from that meeting and was thinking about it, and when my kids were little, 5 minutes was huge. An hour and a half is a lot when you're asking somebody to come in off their boat or come in, like whatever the logistics are of having to do this, when their lives are kind of designed around, once their kids reach school age, this is what now I can actually work and get caught up or whatever. I just feel like I fully support it in a like intellectual way, but in a logistical way, I just feel like we have to come up with that. It's not like an if or an if either or. It's like, okay, we're gonna do this, and on Wednesdays this is what happens from 1:30 to 3.
So, yeah, I think we can, I'm just really feeling like we have really strong competing needs here. Like
Yeah.
if teachers really need this and if we want to provide, we want to provide this excellent for our kids and what we're hearing from the experts is the, and the people who are with the kids and with the, and who do the work, that's what's needed. And I think also it's a very compelling need, for the child care, so that, really, we just have to fill in some of these answers before we get to about this, issue.
I just wanted to add one piece that I'm reading the letters, like I completely agree with what you just said about these competing needs. And some of it is a logistical question, but I think like when I read the letters, I was reading people talk about how important it is for their kids to have time at school.
Right.
And yeah, and for so many reasons, for the academic reasons, but for the social reasons and for building their community. So, and I think if we're looking for that like magical alternative, like how to, like I would encourage us to look like what else could possibly happen at school from 1:30 to 3 on those days. It might be different than, that would afford the time, or at least some of the time that teachers are expecting that they need, but not outsourcing it.
So I would just say, yeah, I can't have that ready by the end.
Yeah.
I think it could be done by the end.
Right.
But we'll have to wait for a while for the end. I definitely hear that, and I know that having that, I think it would be important to, to sort of think about the idea of some flexibility, because if schools are providing that, that's going to take resources and people away from what the need is. And so that needs to be understood going in. If every school is going to have to provide a total program for 100+ kids every day. If it was, if there was a different scenario, if we knew the need and there was some that we'd have to provide for, we might be able to sort of work that out. And I guess that's part of the ask of sort of figuring that out. But if it was, every school doing something, there's resources involved there, and there's individuals that may not be part of, but they need to be a part of maybe the TSS to be able to work. But we'll go back and open our felt pen on this and sharpen the pencil, but that's a we totally have off the felt tip pen. And get that information and see what we can do.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Other business, I think, there any other business? Yeah.
February 27th is open school week.
Awesome, thank you for that.
Is that lighten things up for anything?
That's an awesome meeting.
Future agenda items, clearly, we have the calendar, and we'll have, our usual reports and updates, and, yeah. Are there any other future agenda items? Okay, second public comment. I know you were waiting.
Yes, thank you. I'm Mike Tadman. I'm parent of the two students in the school system, soon to be 3, who is in kindergartner. Just I'll try to keep this pretty quick here. Comment on the data. So the materials provided include quite a bit of supporting data nationally about the value of the MTSS. So that's fine, but that doesn't provide really any information about MTSS coupled with an early release program. What data there is in the report is in this paragraph about the 2018-2019 school year and the 2.7% increase in proficiency rates and decrease in absenteeism. But to me, that's a pretty limited data point. That's 1 year in the same. That's not longitudinal. How do these students do in the years beyond 2019? How are they doing other years implementing it? In the discussions online about this, I've seen lots of reference to Ellsworth successfully implementing hour-and-a-half early release a number of years ago, but I would just note I went took a look at Ellsworth Elementary, performance over the last decade, and it's gone nosedive, during that time period. You know, correlation isn't causation, but, you know, it's worth noting that their standardized testing has gone from like the 62nd percentile in 2016 to the 42nd percentile statewide recently. And then just in terms of, you know, impact on parents, just as a data point, you know, our eldest right now on most days leaves school, goes to the Jessup library, and then goes to her after school programs. You know, that's a pretty smooth thing that she can do on her own. Get around town herself. You know, that's one thing if you're asking her to spend 45 minutes at the library, where she's actually not going to be spending 3 hours at the library or taking the bus home, and the parent has to meet her at home, or, you know, we both work full-time professional jobs. There are times she had to be home alone during that time. That's a long time to spend at any of those locations. So without, you know, sort of a guaranteed option available at the school, that's a tough ask, and, you know, potentially a safety and security issue. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay, our next meeting will be Thursday, the 2nd of March, 2023 at 6 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. Okay. Yep, Thursday, 2nd of March, 5 o'clock. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor, active here.